The inflatable unicorn floated in pieces across the chlorinated water, its rainbow mane torn to shreds by Karen's manicured nails. 7-year-old Emma's sobs echoed off the apartment complex walls as the entitled neighbor stood triumphant, designer handbag clutched like a weapon. But when Karen turned her venom toward the child, calling her a spoiled little brat, something shifted in Sarah Mitchell's stance, and Karen's smug expression began to crumble as the gold federal badge caught the afternoon sun. "Ma'am, you're about to learn why destroying a child's property in front of a federal agent was the worst mistake of your life." The Riverside Gardens apartment complex had always been a sanctuary for David Mitchell and his family. Nestled between mature oak trees and maintained with the kind of suburban precision that attracted young families, it offered the perfect blend of affordability and community that David needed while building his accounting practice. The shared pool area, with its pristine blue water and carefully landscaped surroundings, had become 7-year-old Emma's favorite summer refuge. David watched from their second-floor balcony as Emma paddled around on her beloved inflatable unicorn, its iridescent white body gleaming in the late July sun. The pool toy had been Emma's 6th birthday present, a magnificent creature with a spiraling horn, flowing rainbow mane, and wings that sparkled with every movement. For over a year, it had been her constant companion during their weekend pool visits, transforming ordinary swim time into magical adventures across enchanted seas. "She's getting so confident in the water," Sarah said, joining David at the railing. His wife balanced a glass of iced tea in one hand while adjusting her sunglasses with the other. After 12 years of marriage, David still marveled at how Sarah could look effortlessly elegant even in casual weekend attire. Her auburn hair caught the light as she leaned against the balcony rail, and David couldn't help but smile at the content expression on her face as she watched their daughter play. "Remember when she wouldn't even put her face under?" David chuckled, wrapping an arm around Sarah's waist. "Now look at her. She's practically part dolphin." The peaceful afternoon atmosphere carried the sounds of summer-distant lawnmower, children's laughter from other parts of the complex, and the gentle splash of Emma's movements in the pool. It was the kind of moment that made David grateful for the choices they'd made, the life they'd built together in this quiet corner of suburban Texas. "Daddy, Mommy, watch this." Emma's voice carried up from the pool as she attempted to perform some elaborate maneuver involving sliding off the unicorn's back and climbing back on. Her technique was more enthusiasm than skill, but her joy was infectious. "Very impressive, sweetheart," Sarah called back, giving Emma an encouraging wave. David was about to suggest they head down to join Emma when he noticed a figure emerging. From the building's main entrance, Karen Thornfield strode across the pool deck with a kind of purposeful gait that suggested trouble was brewing. At 42, Karen possessed the sharp-edged beauty of someone who'd learned to weaponize her appearance. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in an aggressive bob that seemed to cut through the air as she moved, and her designer workout clothes, complete with matching accessories, broadcasted her sense of superiority to anyone within a 50-foot radius. David's stomach clenched with familiar dread. In the 8 months since Karen had moved into the complex, she'd established herself as the unofficial enforcer of every rule, regulation, and social hierarchy she could imagine. Her complaints ranged from music being to loud classical music, played at barely audible levels, to children's toys being left poolside for more than her arbitrarily determined acceptable time frame, usually about 30 seconds. Karen's stride never faltered as she approached the pool where Emma continued her innocent play. Completely unaware of the approaching storm, the little girl was singing to herself some made-up song about unicorns and princesses while gently guiding her float around the shallow end. "This isn't good," David said, already moving toward the balcony door. "I should get down there." But Karen was faster than David's descent down the stairs. By the time he reached the pool deck, she was already standing at the pool's edge, her shadow falling across Emma like a dark omen. "Excuse me, little girl." Karen's voice carried the kind of false sweetness that adults used when they were about to crush a child's spirit. "How long has that thing been in the pool?" Emma looked up with the trusting innocence of a 7-year-old who hadn't yet learned that some adults couldn't be trusted. "It's my unicorn. Her name is Rainbow, and she's magic. I didn't ask for its name," Karen snapped, her fake smile dissolving instantly. "I asked how long it's been taking up space in this pool. There are other residents here, you know." We pay good money to use these facilities." David quickened his pace, but the pool deck seemed to stretch endlessly before him. Sarah appeared at his side, having taken the stairs 2 at a time, her face set in the kind of controlled calm that David recognized as dangerous. "The pool toy policy clearly states that inflatables should not monopolize the swimming area," Karen continued, her voice rising to ensure everyone in the vicinity could hear her performance. "Your parents are being incredibly selfish by allowing you to hog the entire pool with that ridiculous ... creature." Emma's face began to crumple with the first signs of confusion and hurt. "But ... but I'm not hogging it. There's lots of room. Don't argue with me, young lady," Karen cut her off, stepping closer to the pool's edge. "Children today have no respect for their elders or consideration for others. Your parents clearly haven't taught you proper manners." That's when David broke into a run. "Hey!" he called out, his voice carrying across the pool deck with more authority than he'd intended. "That's enough." Karen turned toward David with the expression of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this confrontation. "Oh, here comes Daddy to the rescue," she said, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Perhaps you can explain to your daughter why she can't treat the community pool like her personal playground." David reached the pool area, slightly out of breath but trying to maintain his composure. Behind him, Sarah's footsteps echoed on the concrete, but he couldn't turn to look at her. His attention was entirely focused on Karen's aggressive posture and Emma's increasingly distressed expression. "Emma has every right to use the pool," David said evenly, fighting to keep his voice calm despite the anger building in his chest. "There's no rule against pool toys, and she's not bothering anyone." "She's bothering me," Karen shot back, her voice rising to a level that was definitely bothering the elderly couple, who'd been quietly reading on the other side of the pool deck. Emma began to paddle toward the pool's edge, clearly wanting to get closer to her parents. The movement of the unicorn through the water seemed to further enrage Karen, who watched its progress with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for mortal enemies. "There's plenty of room for everyone," Sarah said, finally reaching David's side. Her voice carried a note of steel that David had rarely heard in their domestic life. "Emma is using the shallow end, and the rest of the pool is completely available." Karen's attention shifted to Sarah, and David saw something predatory flicker in her expression. "And you must be the permissive mother who thinks her precious little princess can do no wrong. Let me guess you're one of those parents who thinks..." The insult hit its mark. David saw Sarah's jaw tighten, but she maintained her composed exterior. Years of professional training had taught her to remain calm under pressure, even when every instinct screamed for retaliation. "We're teaching Emma to be considerate of others while also standing up for herself," Sarah replied evenly. "Perhaps that's a lesson some adults could benefit from learning." The barb struck home. Karen's face flushed red beneath her carefully applied makeup, and her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Don't you dare lecture me about consideration," Karen snarled, abandoning any pretense of civility. "I've been dealing with your family's selfishness for months. The noise from your balcony, your daughter's constant shrieking during pool time, your husband's car taking up 2 parking spaces." "That's completely untrue," David interrupted. But Karen was building momentum like a hurricane gathering strength, and now this ridiculous display of entitlement. "Well, I've had enough." Before anyone could react, Karen kicked off her designer sandals and stepped into the pool's shallow end, her workout clothes immediately becoming sodden as she waded toward Emma with purposeful determination. "What are you doing?" Sarah's voice cracked like a whip, but Karen ignored her completely. Emma, confused and frightened by the adult woman advancing toward her in the water, tried to paddle backward on her unicorn float, but the pool's edge prevented her retreat, and Karen closed the distance with frightening speed. "Ma'am, stop." The silence stretched across the pool deck like a taut wire, broken only by Emma's diminishing sobs and the gentle lapping of chlorinated water against the pool's edge. Karen stood motionless in the shallow end, her designer workout clothes clinging to her body as pieces of the destroyed unicorn floated around her like confetti from a nightmare party. David felt the weight of his daughter in his arms, her small body trembling with the aftermath of heartbreak and confusion. Emma's face was buried against his shoulder, but he could feel her stealing glances at the floating remains of Rainbow, each look triggering fresh waves of tears. "This isn't happening," Karen whispered, her voice barely audible across the water. "You're lying. That badge is fake." She held the badge steady, letting Karen get a clear view of every detail: the eagle, the shield, the raised lettering that spelled out her authority in gold relief. "Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, Financial Crimes Division," Sarah said. "Like me to call my field office to verify my credentials? Or would you prefer to explain to them yourself why you just committed multiple crimes in front of a federal officer?" Karen's face had gone white beneath her carefully applied makeup. She took a stumbling step backward in the pool, her hands reaching out blindly as if trying to steady herself against something that wasn't there. But you're always home," Karen stammered, her voice rising with desperate confusion. "See you here during the day. You don't work. You're just a wife, a mother. You bake cookies for the school fundraiser. You wear cardigans." The observation was so absurd that David almost smiled, despite the circumstances. He'd always marveled at how effectively Sarah had managed to blend into their suburban environment, becoming invisible in the way that only the best federal agents could. Her cover wasn't elaborate or constructed, it was simply the natural result of a woman who knew how to compartmentalize her life with surgical precision. "Remote work arrangement," Sarah replied smoothly. "Financial crimes investigations don't always require field presence. Computer forensics, money laundering analysis, wire fraud cases, most of it can be done from anywhere with a secure connection. My supervisor approved the arrangement when Emma started school." David felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. The home office that Sarah kept locked, the encrypted phone calls she sometimes took on the balcony, the way she always seemed to know exactly what to do in any crisis. It all made perfect sense now that the truth was out in the open. Karen shook her head violently, sending water droplets flying. "That's not a federal crime. You can't arrest me for that." "Actually," Sarah said, pulling out her phone with her free hand, while keeping the badge visible, destruction of property, harassment of a minor, disturbing the peace, and creating a public disturbance are all violations I can detain you for. But more importantly, your behavior demonstrates a pattern of aggressive conduct that suggests you might be involved in other activities that would interest my colleagues." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. David watched Karen's expression shift from defiance to genuine fear as the implications sank in. What does that mean?" Karen's voice cracked on the words. Sarah began typing on her phone, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Oh, just that federal agents tend to be thorough. Background checks, financial records, employment, history, social media analysis, association mapping. We're very good at finding patterns that local law enforcement might miss." The elderly couple across the pool deck had abandoned any pretense of reading and were now openly staring at the unfolding drama. Mrs. Chen, the apartment manager, had appeared at the pool gate, drawn by the commotion. Her expression shifted from annoyance to alarm as she took in the scene: David holding his sobbing daughter in the pool, Karen standing waist-deep in her clothes, and Sarah displaying what was unmistakably a federal badge. "Is everything all right here?" "Just documenting a criminal incident," Sarah replied without looking up from her phone. To explain her actions before I contact the local authorities, Karen's legs seemed to give out slightly, and she grabbed onto the pool's edge for support. "Criminal incident? It was just a stupid toy. Kids lose toys all the time. Children don't typically lose toys to adult strangers who deliberately destroy them in fits of rage," Sarah corrected calmly. "When it's done in a public setting while screaming at the child and her parents, it becomes disturbing the peace and creating a public disturbance." David shifted Emma's weight in his arms, whispering soothing words to her as she continued to cry, but he was listening intently to every word of Sarah's professional assessment. Amazed at how quickly his wife had transformed from weekend mom to federal law enforcement officer. "Plus," Sarah continued, her thumb still moving across her phone screen, "there's the matter of your verbal assault on Emma, calling a 7-year-old a spoiled brat, and telling her that her parents don't care about her constitutes verbal abuse of a minor. That's something Child Protective Services takes very seriously." "Child Protective Services?" Karen's voice rose to a near shriek. "You can't call CPS on me. I don't even have kids." "Oh, I'm not calling them about you having children," Sarah said with deadly calm. "I'm calling them to report that a child was verbally abused by an adult neighbor who then destroyed her property in an apparent attempt to cause emotional distress." They'll want to document Emma's trauma and ensure she receives appropriate counseling. They'll also want to investigate whether other children in the complex have been subjected to similar treatment. The color drained completely from Karen's face. David could practically see her mental wheels turning as she considered the implications of a CPS investigation in her apartment complex. "You're insane," Karen whispered. "All of this over a pool toy. You're completely insane, am I?" Sarah finally looked up from her phone, her green eyes cold as winter ice. "Let me paint you a picture, Karen. A federal agent's 7-year-old daughter is enjoying a peaceful afternoon in her apartment complex's pool when an adult neighbor approaches her aggressively, berates her for using the facilities she has every right to use. That same neighbor then escalates the situation by screaming at the child and her parents, creating a public disturbance that traumatizes the victim." Sarah paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "Or are they going to see it as an adult predator targeting and abusing children in what should be a safe environment?" "I'm not a predator," Karen finally managed to whisper. Sarah interrupted sharply. "Show me the specific rule that prohibited Emma from using her pool toy." Karen looked around desperately. As if the answer might be written on the pool deck or posted on the nearby fence, the general courtesy rules. "About sharing facilities, there are no such rules," Mrs. Chen interjected from the gate, her voice carrying the authority of someone who knew every regulation in the complex. "Pool toys are permitted, as long as they don't pose a safety hazard." The child wasn't violating any policies. The statement hit Karen like a physical blow. She slumped against the pool wall, her carefully constructed justification crumbling around her. "So we have an adult who approached a child, berated her for activities that violated no rules, destroyed her personal property, verbally abused her, and created a public disturbance," Sarah summarized clinically, "all witnessed by multiple residents and documented by a federal law enforcement officer. This wasn't the gentlewoman who made pancakes on Sunday mornings or helped Emma with her homework. This was a predator in her own right, methodically dismantling Karen's defenses with the precision of someone who'd done this countless times before. What do you want?" Karen's voice was barely audible now, defeated and desperate. Sarah considered the question for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "I want you to understand the gravity of what you've done. You traumatized a 7-year-old girl because you were having a bad day and decided to take it out on the most vulnerable person available. That's not just criminal behavior, it's sociopathic behavior." Emma's crying had slowed to occasional hiccups, but David could feel her tension as she listened to the adult conversation swirling around her. He wanted to get her out of this situation, to shield her from the uglin. The sound of Karen's breakdown seemed to break whatever spell had held the pool deck in suspended animation. Mrs. Chen hurried forward, her keys jangling as she fumbled with the gate latch, while the elderly couple gathered their belongings with the practiced efficiency of people who'd learned to recognize when situations were about to become official. David felt Emma shift in his arms, her small face turning toward the commotion with the morbid curiosity that children couldn't help but display. When the adult world revealed its uglier truths, her tears had stopped, replaced by a wide-eyed fascination. That made David's chest tighten with protective instinct. "Daddy," Emma whispered, her voice hoarse from crying, "is the mean lady going to jail?" The question carried across the water with devastating clarity, and Karen's sobs intensified as if Emma had physically struck her. David saw Sarah's expression soften slightly, the first crack in her federal agent facade since she'd revealed her badge. "That depends on what she does next, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her voice gentler but still carrying an edge of steel. She crouched down beside the pool, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. "Sometimes adults make very bad choices, and when they do, they have to face the consequences. But they also get chances to make things right." Karen raised her head from where she knelt in the water, mascara streaming down her cheeks in dark rivulets. Her designer workout clothes clung to her body like wet rags, and pieces of the destroyed unicorn continued to float around her like accusatory evidence. "I'm sorry," she gasped, her words barely intelligible through her tears. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I just... Bad days don't justify destroying children's toys," Sarah replied coldly. "Bad days don't excuse verbal abuse of a 7-year-old. Mrs. Chen finally managed to unlock the gate and stepped onto the pool deck, her expression a mixture of professional concern and personal horror. As the apartment manager, she'd probably dealt with neighbor disputes before, but David doubted she'd ever encountered anything quite like this. "Ms. Thornfield," Mrs. Chen said carefully, "perhaps you should get out of the pool, and we can discuss this situation calmly." Karen nodded frantically, struggling to regain her footing on the pool's slippery bottom. But as she tried to stand, her legs betrayed her again, and she nearly fell face-first into the water. The sight of the aggressive woman reduced to such a pathetic state might have been satisfying if not for Emma's continued presence. "David," Sarah said quietly, "why don't you take Emma upstairs? Let her get cleaned up and maybe watch a movie while I handle this." David nodded gratefully, but as he turned toward the pool steps, Emma twisted in his arms to look back at the scene. "What about Rainbow?" she asked, her voice small and lost. "Can we save her?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. David looked at the scattered pieces of deflated plastic floating in the chlorinated water, some torn beyond recognition, others slowly sinking toward the pool's bottom. There was no saving Rainbow. "Rainbow is gone, baby," David said softly, his own voice threatening to crack. "But we'll find you another unicorn, okay? Maybe an even better one." Emma's face crumpled slightly, but she nodded with the resilient acceptance that children somehow managed when faced with loss. It was a trait that never failed to humble David, the way kids could process tragedy and move forward with a grace that most adults couldn't match. "Will it be magic too?" Emma asked hopefully. "All unicorns are magic," David assured her, pressing a kiss to the top of her damp head. "That's what makes them unicorns." As David carried Emma toward the pool gate, he heard Karen's voice behind them, desperate and pleading. "I'll buy her a new one," Karen called out, struggling once again to stand in the shallow water. "I'll buy her 10 new ones, whatever she wants, please. I can't have this on my record. I work in real estate. This could ruin my career." Sarah's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Now you're concerned about your career? Where was that concern when you were screaming at a 7-year-old? David paused at the gate, unable to resist listening to his wife dismantle Karen's desperate attempts at bargaining. It was like watching a master craftsman at work, each word precisely chosen for maximum impact. "Please," Karen begged, finally managing to get to her feet, but swaying dangerously. "I'll do anything. I'll pay for counseling. I'll replace the toy. I'll write a formal apology. Just please don't file charges. I can't afford a criminal record." "You should have thought about that before you decided to take your frustrations out on a child," Sarah replied evenly. "Actions have consequences, Karen. That's a lesson most people learn before they turn 40. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, her managerial instincts finally kicking in. "Perhaps we could work something out," she suggested diplomatically. "If Ms. Thornfield is willing to make full restitution and agree to certain behavioral conditions, ... Sarah's head turned toward the apartment manager with laser focus. "Are you suggesting that destroying a child's property and verbally abusing her should be handled as an internal matter rather than a criminal one?" The question carried enough implied threat to make Mrs. Chen take a hasty step backward. "No, of course not. I just thought, if the family was willing to accept an alternative resolution..." "The family isn't the only party involved here," Sarah said coldly. David felt Emma's weight shift in his arms as she leaned closer to his ear. "Daddy, I want to go home now. I don't like the mean lady crying." The simple statement cut through David's fascination with the confrontation. His daughter had been through enough trauma for one day. She needed safety, comfort, and normalcy, not a front-row seat to Karen's public destruction. "You're right, sweetheart," David murmured. "Let's go upstairs." But as he turned to leave, Karen's voice rose to a near shriek of desperation. "Wait, please, I'll tell you everything." The words stopped everyone in their tracks. Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly, and even Mrs. Chen looked puzzled by the declaration. "Everything about what?" Sarah asked carefully. Karen was breathing heavily now, her chest heaving as she stood waist-deep in the pool with pieces of unicorn floating around her, like the debris of her former life. "About the embezzlement," she gasped. "About the client's money I've been moving. About the offshore accounts." The silence that followed was deafening. David felt his own eyes widen as he processed what Karen had just confessed to. But Sarah's expression remained carefully neutral, the face of a federal agent who'd just received unexpected intelligence. "Interesting," Sarah said softly, "and you're offering this information because I can't lose everything over a stupid pool toy. I'll cooperate. I'll testify. I'll give you whatever you need. Just please don't let this destroy my life." David realized he was witnessing something extraordinary, a federal investigation being born from a neighborhood dispute over a child's toy. Sarah pulled out her phone again, but this time she wasn't taking pictures. She was making a call. "Agent Mitchell here," she said into the device, her voice crisp and professional. "I need to speak with A. Richardson immediately. I have a potential asset in a financial crimes case." Yes, she's offering cooperation. No, it's complicated. Karen's sobs had turned to hyperventilation as she realized the full scope of what she'd just set in motion. Mrs. Chen looked like she was about to faint, and David felt Emma's small hand pat his cheek in a gesture of comfort. "It's okay, Daddy," Emma whispered. "The mean lady is sorry now. Maybe she'll be nice to other kids." The innocent observation hit David like a physical blow. Even after everything Karen had done to her, Emma was still capable of compassion, still hoping for the best in people. It was a reminder of why children needed protection from adults who'd lost their way. Sarah ended her call and looked directly at Karen, who was still standing in the pool like a defendant awaiting sentencing. "You're going to get out of that pool, dry yourself off, and then you're going to sit down and wait for my colleagues to arrive," Sarah said with quiet authority. "You're not under arrest yet, but anything you say from this point forward is being recorded and can be used in any legal proceedings that may follow." She held up her phone, showing Karen that the recording function was active. "Do you understand your rights as I've explained them to you?" Karen nodded frantically, water still dripping from her ruined clothes. Yes, I understand. I'll cooperate completely. I'll tell you everything about the real estate fraud, the client accounts, the money laundering, all of it." "Good," Sarah replied, "because destroying my daughter's toy was just the beginning of your problems. Now we're going to discuss your financial crimes, and trust me, Karen, that's where things get really serious." David carried Emma toward the apartment building, leaving behind the pool deck where his wife was about to transform a neighborhood bully into a federal informant, all because Karen had made the catastrophic mistake.